wins in a fight if Kenpachi had fought Yhwach after mastering his Bankai. Now keep it in mind that Yhwach already considered him to be one of the 5 special war threats. If you don't know what that means, we'll be making a video on that soon enough, but this was even before he unlocked his Bankai. He was considered among the likes of Aizen, Urahara, Ichibei, and Ichigo, and that's saying a lot already. So what if he already had full mastery over his Bankai? Would he have still lost to Yhwach? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Honestly, I hope they do more with his Bankai in the anime when we finally get to that point, but until then, how about we take a quick look into Kenpachi's character, his Bankai, and how he finally unlocked it, and just how strong this thing is. Now the Bleach universe is full of some ridiculously strong and broken anime characters, but some of you might even be kind of surprised at how a few of these guys match up to some of the more weaker or even mid-tier characters in Dragon Ball. A few of the characters and their powers that we're going to be talking about throughout this series get absolutely insane. And yet, if there is one character who remains sincere in his pursuit for worthy challengers, that is Kenpachi Zaraki. A man who started off as a nameless child, even when he had nothing. He had strength, and then one day, while he was still a kid, a young Zaraki meets a woman named Unohana. She effectively changes this young warrior's life and awakens an insane lust for battle within him, but back then, little did Kenpachi Zaraki know that he was already much stronger than her. He was already stronger than the first Kenpachi, which is an insanely big deal since only the strongest Kenpachi of the era is allowed to even bear that name. In the words of Unohana herself, there is only one Kenpachi every era. That is a rule and also an unavoidable destiny. However, the key takeaway here is how Kenpachi didn't know anything about this. He knew nothing about his own Zanpakuto. His subconsciousness had deliberately placed limitations on his own body. I mean, this guy intentionally wears an eye patch and other ornaments like the bells in his hair that serve to restrict his own abilities, and even in some cases give his opponents an advantage that he feels they may need. So if there's anybody in this series that I feel like will get along great with Goku and Vegeta, it's probably Kenpachi. I mean, we're talking about a guy that nerfed himself subconsciously and consciously. Still, since his battle with Ichigo and from there on out, Kenpachi's next big opponent was always stronger than the previous one, and so he was also subconsciously letting go in order to use a bit more of his strength. In fact, if you're his opponent and you've already given up on the fight, then he'll just let you go, because an enemy who may fight him later out of vengeance is better than a dead enemy whom he'll never be able to fight again. Now, all that stuff I just told you guys is exciting and all that, but the most striking part about his legacy is how he not only became a captain of the Gotai 13 without unlocking his Bankai, but he also didn't even know the name of his own Zanpakuto. At the end of his battle with Ichigo, he tries calling out to his Zanpakuto with the hope of hearing a reply, but all he gets is silence that slowly envelops the air around him. So how does he finally hear the voice of his own Zanpakuto? Well, as we do know, Kenpachi got absolutely humiliated during the first invasion of the Soul Society by Yhwach and his Quincy. I mean, I'm not even sure if it was Royd who did him dirty or if it was Yhwach, but all I know is he just got like off-screen something crazy. Then, this is when Unohana would take him to an underground fighting prison to finally break him free of the limitations he had placed upon himself. But the twisted idea here is how he has to kill her to awaken it. I mean, she's a Kenpachi, and he's a Kenpachi, and there can only be one true Kenpachi as stated earlier, and so Unohana continues to slay him and heal him over and over and over again so that he gradually keeps getting stronger until finally Kenpachi becomes aware of his actual strength. So basically she just kept killing him and reviving him over and over and over again until he finally went through enough Zenkai boost to just be back at full power. Now don't get me wrong, it was still an emotional roller coaster for all of us, especially Kenpachi, since he now had to defeat and kill the person whom he respected the most, but at least he's without a doubt the strongest Kenpachi now, right? I mean, I guess. For Unohana, she knew that Kenpachi's awakening here in this moment was crucial for the future of the Soul Society. And then it happens. He slays her, and for the first time in forever, he hears a voice. It's the voice of his own Zanpakuto. By defeating Unohana, he finally became a true Kenpachi. As for his Zanpakuto, its name? Nazarashi. And honestly, if I was Kenpachi and it took this damn much for my Zanpakuto to talk to me, and I had to put down the one person I respected the most? Man. Anyways, then there's Yachiru. She served as his lieutenant, but as it turns out, she was actually a part of his Bankai all this time. Of course, I can understand if this may lead to some confusion, so how about we take Kubo's own words as the explanation for what's going on here. He says himself that Yachiru represents a form of Kenpachis Bankai that was separated from its main body, and which gained the power of a Shinigami upon receiving a name from Kenpachi. The true embodiment of Nazarashi is that of a grown woman. So I like to imagine something like Zangetsu and Tensa Zangetsu. That should make it a little bit easier. But yes, Yachiru is a part of it all. She's the manifestation of his Bankai, while Nazarashi is his Zanpakuto as a whole. Later during the war, this is when all hell would break loose. When Kenpachi is getting dragged around by Gerald, Yachiru calls out to him and says that the fun has only just begun. And right then, in that intense moment, as a sudden splurge of energy envelops his surroundings, Kenpachi had done it. He would finally release his own Bankai. He had turned red all over, his blade resembles a shorter version of the Shikai he had unlocked earlier, video coming up on that soon as well. And the most menacing thing about it is how the sheer emergence of his Bankai is too much even for his own body. His limbs are getting destroyed in real time by his own energy, and he's appeared to have lost control, and everything about him is now unstable. And I feel confident in saying if he were given even just 10 years to master and mature his Bankai, he would have been a completely different category of menace. And going back to the Zanpakuto, even at first glance, anyone can tell that it's bigger and longer than a normal one. Pause. As it just so happens, Zaraki Kenpachi is the first ever individual in the history of the Gotai 13 who had no idea about the name or identity of his Zanpakuto before becoming a captain. Meanwhile, of course, all the other captains were kind of just thriving with their Bankai at this point. During Kenpachi's fight with Ichigo, Zangetsu mentions the disharmony between him and his sword, causing damage to them both. That's also why Kenpachi's blade always seems so worn out and old. Still, he continued moving forward and like a true swordsman, kept cutting down whatever was in front of him. It was also this fight with Ichigo that finally led Kenpachi to the realization that he should try to get to know his Zanpakuto a little better, but as we all know, all he received in return was silence. However, now that he has heard the voice of Nazarashi finally, let's talk a little bit more about his Shikai and his Bankai. His Shikai completely changes his blade into something that resembles both an axe and a war cleaver. This only really further enhances the scope of what it can cut. As for his Shikai's special ability, well, it's basically enhanced cutting prowess, and we know that's true because Kenpachi just cuts a meteor with a single attack. Then, there's Kenpachi's Bankai. When he finally does unleash it, a massive surge of energy overwhelms his surroundings, his skin turns dark red, he gains black tattoos, and begins to resemble the appearance of a demon. In Japanese folklore, they call demons Oni, and if you look at Kenpachi Zaraki's appearance in his Bankai, you can definitely see how he's based after the Oni. As for his abilities, he becomes the literal embodiment of sheer raw power. I mean, he just casually topples my boy Gerald here and then rips off his arm in a single sequence of movements. He then proceeds to maniacally slice this guy up, and as Yachiru stated, he can cut anything in half. Anything. In hindsight, I think it's pretty safe to say that Kenpachi Zaraki has had some of the coolest character growth in all of anime, as there were even serious implications behind his Zanpakuto even back during his fight with Ichigo. But back then, we could have never anticipated that the big reveal would be this intense and insane. He doesn't have the experience that comes from old age like Yamamoto, he isn't a genius like Aizen, and he didn't have the Hogyoku either. Neither is he so many races combined like Ichigo. And he's definitely not the son of the Soul King. But be that as it may, this man still bears the name Kenpachi, which I do have to remind you guys, means the strongest.